Tonight's session is a Zoom webinar. All participants are muted. If you would like to interact with us, you can use the following features in your Zoom control panel. Use the chat function at any time to share greetings, comments, reactions, and affirmations. Use the Q&A function at any time to write the questions you have for our guests. We'll have time towards the end to answer your questions. You can use the raise hand function after the moderated conversation if you'd like to unmute and ask a question or share a comment. I'll pause for a moment to make sure everyone is on the right channel. We'll open our program tonight with welcome remarks and then move to our moderated conversation about the future of care. Afterwards, we'll invite you, the audience, to share your questions, comments, reactions, and affirmations. Now it's my pleasure to invite All Our Kin's co-founder and CEO, Jessica Sager, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Dana. Welcome, everyone. I am so happy to be here with this incredible group of educators and entrepreneurs. Creating and running a business is hard work. Every family childcare educator here with us tonight has built something new, something that didn't exist before. Each of you has built a business, one that is making a difference for the children and families you serve, your own family, and your neighborhood. You have sustained communities during the COVID-19 pandemic and given hope, joy, and love to so many people. Your family childcare businesses are truly the future of care. So I'm delighted to be here with you as entrepreneurs for tonight's conversation with Danielle Kristine Toussaint and Kumba Hines. Danielle Kristine Toussaint is a storyteller, strategist, and social impact leader. She is author of the book, Dare to Think Purple, a survival guide for women in social entrepreneurship, and has also written op-eds and speeches for Huffington Post, Forbes, and TEDx. Currently, she oversees development, communications, and partnerships as Chief External Affairs Officer for New Schools Venture Fund. Most recently, she was the inaugural mortgage communicator in residence for the Ascended Aspen Institute. Previously, she founded and led She Thinks Purple, a women-powered creative agency that partners with purpose-driven entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders to tell inspiring brand stories and change the world. A proud alumna and active mentor to first-gen college students, Danielle holds a BA in Political Science and African American Studies from Yale and an MS in Education from the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. And Danielle says, with Caribbean family roots, she speaks Haitian Creole, Spanish, French, and Jamaican patois. I am also incredibly excited to welcome Kumba Hines. Kumba, as many of you know, is an extraordinary family childcare educator. She is the owner of Growing Sprouts Daycare in Trumbull, Connecticut. Kumba has been in business since 2013 and she has worked with All Our Kin from the very beginning. It has been our great honor to partner with her as she transforms the lives of so many children and families. Kumba and Danielle, as it happens, are close family friends. And it was Danielle who first told Kumba about All Our Kin. So now we have come full circle, and I am so glad to welcome both of you here. And Kumba, with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that introduction. Thank you. Thanks for the generous introduction. I am thrilled to be introducing Danielle Toussaint today for both personal and professional reasons. Danielle is known as my second daughter. She and my eldest daughter met at Yale during their freshman orientation and have been inseparable ever since. Just as the two of them are close, our families have built an everlasting friendship. When she called me a few weeks ago and asked if I would be willing to moderate this special event with all our kin, I was touched and humbled by her request. You see, when I opened my daycare in 2013, as Jessica mentioned, and was looking for outside support, it was Danielle who told me about this great organization named All Our Kin. She suggested that I reach out. I have been connected and working with All Our Kin ever since. Thank you, Danielle, for making this connection. And thank you, Jessica and Jana, for your leadership. Your tireless support of child care providers like myself across the state of Connecticut and other states means more than you know. So today, it feels like I have come full circle as I have the absolute pleasure of having a conversation with Danielle. You heard her bio already. So let's get right into this discussion. So Danielle, I can honestly say that your book helped me think differently about the work that I do and how I fit into the world of social entrepreneurship. So why social entrepreneurship? So many have heard the term social entrepreneurship before, but do not think it applies, to them, myself included, actually. How do you define it? Also, why is it helpful to think about the work of family care providers in this way?
I'm going to get to your question, I promise. But I first have to say my thank yous. It's really great to be in this conversation with you, Ms. Hines. And I think about the folks who first introduced me to the concept of being able to build an organization or do business in such a way that it could help shift things for the communities that I cared about. Jana Wagner's leadership in the Yale community, in the Dwight Hall community, in New Haven, certainly helped me to begin to see that as a possibility. And Jessica's connection to that community it looms very great, right? So I have an incredible amount of affinity and gratitude to the way that our kin has engaged in the work with community, always respecting the dignity of everyone at the table and truly leveraging their access to power and relationships to be able to open up space and access for others. That's a really big piece of this. So there was really an awakening for me while I was just thinking about the work, even as a student, through internships, through community service, that there were so many examples that there was a better and different way that we could engage in enterprise. So I define social entrepreneurship as anyone whose goals for the company, the business that they're building, goes beyond just money and is explicitly about creating a better society as a social entrepreneur. And sometimes it's that your organization is a nonprofit, but the way that you're doing the work is creating access for others. You are a social entrepreneur. And I think that many, many more women and people of color that are doing this work naturally and instinctually build their companies a different way because they've experienced what it's like to maybe not have the same access and opportunities. And so from the very beginning, they design everything they do to help alleviate those tensions, those burdens, those oppressions, and create different spaces. We are all then social entrepreneurs, and it's really helpful to think of ourselves in that way because there's a very big network of support out there for those that want to build successful enterprises in that way. And once we understand our place in that ecosystem, then we can get connected to the folks that can help accelerate the work that we're doing every day.
That's great. It does give me, a better understanding of probably intertwining, what I do to what you just said. The next, question or agenda that I would like to maybe dive into is the rules of daring. In your book, you interviewed dozens of women who are leading and growing companies and organizations that solve a particular social problem. What were some of the themes you heard about what it takes, to be successful?
I think the first thing I want everyone to know is there were 50 women whose stories I include and talk about in this book. And in that mix, they span every facet of identity that you can think of, whether it is race or socioeconomic background, whether it was first generation in this country, whether they were folks for whom English was not their first language and they learned it. Others were at midlife, in their mid-60s, thinking about the legacies that they would build and leave for their families. Other women were in their mid-20s and thinking about how to transition careers from something like bioscience to sustainable fashion design. So the very vastness of the people that I got to talk about and how different their stories were. Some were moms, others were not. Some were navigating fertility treatments to become mothers. Others were at just such different stages. And yet there were still sort of these 5 big rules that kind of emerged across those conversations, which included things like being clear about your purpose, being creative, and how you thought about yourself and using your imagination to create new possibilities, being courageous, building your own confidence, and also building community. And there are sort of two specific stories that I'll mention. And one of them is a woman named Laura Donald. And she was about at the 7-year mark of building her company. And she talked about how for the first 3 years, one of the biggest challenges that she navigated personally was around motherhood. She had one child. She was attempting to grow her family, was going through multiple rounds of IVF, and so much about her health she felt had nothing to do, right, with the company she was building. And it wasn't until she learned that the real strength, the resilience that she was demonstrating personally was what was helping her to fuel and see what she could accomplish as an entrepreneur in a different light. When she brought those two things closer together, those sort of lessons that were very human and very accessible around just adversity helped her to become a different kind of business leader. And I loved that she shared that story in the context of how she became more confident in leadership, because I think so many of us think that the things we go through in our personal lives are somehow not consequential or don't really have anything to do with the work that we're doing, but we are the same person navigating both things. And so the more that we leave room for our whole selves, the more that we acknowledge the things we've gone through, the challenges we've already overcome, and see that as what qualifies us and demonstrates our grit and our resilience, the better we set ourselves up for success. The second story is that of a woman named Callan Fleming, and she's had so many careers. She started off as a teacher, and then she, was an executive in nonprofit leadership, and then ultimately started launching her own now tech-enabled company to help parents, find workplaces that actually demonstrate a commitment to caretakers and caretakers at the whole stage, whether you're the mother of a new child or father of a new child, or you're caring for aging parents. She wants us to see caregiving as something that matters. And she talks about her first day back to work after her own maternity leave, and like how nothing went as planned. Like the baby got sick, her husband couldn't leave, and she found herself like heading back home by 10 a.m. And she had like such big plans for her first day back to work. And what she described in that process, right, was the fact that she had to come to terms with the fact that she could not succeed in one domain if she wasn't accommodating the shifts in her life. And her real rallying cry was for us to see the greater policy implications of ensuring that all parents and all caregivers have the full network of support that they need to be able to engage meaningfully in the workforce. I believe that her story matters for all of you who are family child care educators and providers, because these are the individual stories that you navigate with the parents and families that you provide this network of support for. And it can be easy to see that work as devalued. But here was a mother talking about the fact that care, having reliable care in her life was going to facilitate her being able to build a company, and we needed better systems for it. So those are just some of the stories that emerge when I think about, why it matters that we sort of follow those rules. And the rules of daring are not about following an external roadmap. It's about looking inside and really acknowledging ourselves in the full context of our lives.
That's great. I am sure that there were many, many, many more interesting stories from the audience that you engaged with. That just brings us, to the power of storytelling for leaders and social entrepreneurs. Why is being able to tell your story so important for entrepreneurs who are mission driven? And what are some recommendations for how to do this well? We can all learn from this, I think.
Story is the most original and effective way that humans know how to communicate with each other. I have the pleasure of just in my own network being connected to quite a few pretty amazing women physicians who I am able to talk to about a range of things. And one of them is my good friend and former classmate, Dr. Jocelyn Woodard, and she's a neuroscientist and neurosurgeon. And I asked her about, like, truly break this down for me, like the science of what story does to the brain. And the best way and the easiest way that she could explain it to me, for me to include in the book, was the sense that the parts of our brain that process information and the parts of our brain that process emotion get activated to the same extent when we begin to tell stories. And it's the only thing that truly wakes up the human mind, opens our hearts and our imaginations at the same time. So storytelling is necessary no matter who we are, no matter what we do, if we want to be able to communicate in a way that can get other people genuinely invested in what we care about and what we're doing. That aside, I think it's especially important because of the personal nature of care. Every family and all of the children that are then, by extension, served through the work that you all do, have stories, and they're sitting in a context. There's a reason that you decided that the way you wanted to contribute to the world in building your business was to provide high quality early learning experiences. And the fact that this happens often in home-based and very personal ways means that you are the touch point and the gateway that helps young learners get on a path to, being able to engage educationally and be successful. And there's stories wrapped up in that. So we need to capture those. And it's the same for the families and their ability to get ahead economically, which is only made possible because they can be in the workforce or engaged in their own entrepreneurial engagement because they know their loved ones are cared for and safe. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we are seeing the huge ramifications, particularly women and people of color that are having to exit the workforce because the foundation of care, right, is not solid. So the work you're doing is a part of a much bigger story about how we build ways that we can become more prosperous as a society. We don't get there if we're not caring for our loved ones, and if that's a daily concern. So I think that the more we hear your stories, the more inspiring it is, and also the more it can help inform solutions at a policy level, at a practice level, so that we don't just keep talking around it, but we actually get to the heart of what would make things easier for our families.
When you think about the bigger mission of all our kin, what opportunity exists for each educator and provider like myself and some of the audience members in our network to elevate the work we do? Why does it matter that we are a part of something bigger than just our individual businesses?
I open chapter 5 of my book, which is Build Community, with a quote from a brilliant woman who's a serial entrepreneur. It's like she's had 7 different careers with all of the companies that she's helped build and get sold. Her name is Tiffany Norwood, and she talks about the power of we. And she says, yes, I needed a lot of miracles to start and grow her companies, she said, and those miracles came in the form of other people showing up at the right moment and in the right way. Mentors, co-founders, investors, customers. We made me the success that I am today. And I think her words capture the sentiment of why organizations, communities like All Our Kin have such a rich and accelerating impact on the greater ecosystem, because they give you the opportunity to access the miracles that you need. And because we know the experience of building a business, it is grueling. And there are different times where things sort of work in these waves, where there are moments where everything feels like it's going exactly right. And then there are moments of real challenge that you're navigating. And you almost want to say, oh, I just need a miracle right now. I don't see how it's going to happen. And people can be your miracles, right? And those of us who have access or knowledge can become these brokers of trust for one another to open up the avenues for support. And we've talked about this, Ms. Hines, like you've shared moments where that's been true for you. So all our kin, I think, is holding a space between those that are doing the work every day on the ground and those who may be talking about and caring about that work, but don't know how they can be really helpful and supportive. And I think they create a bridge, a necessary bridge. And, you know, back to that idea of story, they're also a place where we get to share and learn, like in forums like tonight. And I hope that that's, you know, as we move to discussion, there's expertise in every corner of this Zoom conversation. It's not just held between the two of us. There's expertise in the chat. There's expertise in connecting with the other people that tuned in this evening. And it's tapping into those communities that lets us be able to move a lot farther and a lot faster.
What advice, would you share? And also, how can our audience stay connected? How can we stay connected?
So I would just say my closing in this part is not even advice. It's so much it's gratitude, right? So I hold an incredible amount of gratitude for every single person who's contributed to me being able to engage in entrepreneurial activity, right? Like people who affirmed my ideas, people who referred other people to me, those who made connections, those who've attended, those who are here, even just in this conversation. I hold that gratitude. And I would say the way that I like to demonstrate my appreciation is by paying that forward, by doing those same things whenever I encounter others that are building. And so that's what I would say is like the next portion of our time together is a conversation. Offer freely your thoughts, your questions. Others may be sitting with those same thoughts and questions, and just stay open to that, to the expertise and the knowledge that gets shared. And then the last thing is I am very active on LinkedIn. It's my platform of choice. And so I would say we'll be happy to share information, but that's the best place to connect with me. And I believe that as part of tonight's event, there's sort of like a raffle opportunity for some folks to be able to get copies of the book. But for those that do want it, it's available on Amazon in the sort of ebook format and also in paperback and soon in hardcover.
Wonderful. Dana?
Thank you so much, Danielle and Kumba, for leading us through this such an interesting and important conversation as we're thinking about the work that we do. I am here available to share any questions that come through the Q&A from our audience. Right now, as of now, we've only received one about the link to your book, and I said that I would share that towards the end of our program. So this is the time when we can take further questions through the Q&A if you'd like to write them. And if you would like to raise your hand and unmute to share a question or a comment, you can also do that. So I see a question in the chat, which is, what's the name of the book? And the book is called Dare to Think Purple. While we're waiting for people, I actually would like to ask our guests a question, if that's okay. And my question is this, and I invite either Danielle or Kumba or both of you to answer. If there are people joining us tonight, educators and providers, if they begin to see themselves as social entrepreneurs, if they didn't do so already, what impact do you think this will have on the future of care?
The impact of our conversation today, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, what I mean to say is, through this conversation, we've been talking a lot about the idea of social entrepreneurship and how we think that family childcare is a social enterprise. And I wonder, as more and more people, maybe some of the people joining tonight, begin to see themselves as social entrepreneurs, how do you think that will impact the future of care?
I can answer, and I'm also seeing a couple of questions in other places. Shannon, I'll get to you next around just the meaning and significance of purple. But one of the biggest things is that it takes a group of people who are delivering something so fundamental to driving our economy overall, but who often, because of the work of care being undervalued, pushed to the margin, and then sort of rendered invisible, right? Like ends up getting missed in our conversation. I think it elevates the work that you're doing to its proper place. It puts you in the right conversation about how you are significant in driving something that we're all trying to fix. When you think about economic recovery and resilience and still navigating COVID and hopefully soon post-COVID world, how on earth do we have that conversation without seeing how central to that is the future of care and caregiving and the business around caregiving? And that's what all of you, I think, are demonstrating really clear models and pathways to. So to me, the reason for that reimagination and really seeing yourself as a social entrepreneur is because you're taking your rightful place in a policy and economic conversation where so often I think it's just missed. And to the question about the significance, my background is actually in communications, social and digital marketing and branding. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about color associations and creative associations. And ironically, 1 in 3 women's favorite color is purple. And I knew that a lot of my work was going to touch the work around, like it was going to be working with women and also communities of color. So just very obviously, I knew that it was a color that would always start a conversation, and that's why I picked it. But purple also has some other really important associations like courage, creativity, and I think it really elevates conversations. And so I wanted to make sure that it stood in for the bigger ideas around the movement I hope to spark through language. So that is why purple. Gladys, I think you're asking a question about the inspiration and how did I even start? And I would say the inspiration came because I was also working on starting a creative agency. I was early in my journey as an entrepreneur, and I knew that this was going to be impact focused, but I also was getting so much support and answers around how to proceed by just being in conversation and learning from the people around me. And many of them were incredible women who were just doing the hard work and figuring things out along the way. And there were not many books in the canon on how to do entrepreneurship in ways that were impact focused, that were written by women, that were written by women of color, and that were written by people who were not occupying like a very high sort of like either venture capital or philanthropic role, that were just doing the work. So it seemed like there was a real gap, and I wanted to introduce in some ways to the larger conversation these amazing women who were just everyday people doing great things. And I hope that more people write the stories down of their friends, of their partners, because it is those folks that I think are most inspiring, not just the people who've like already made it and are billionaires. Like we love those stories too, but I think we need way more stories that tell the truth about how hard it is and that chronicle the work that goes into like the first 5 years of building something that we've not seen before.
Danielle, we have several questions in the Q&A. Are you able to see them or do you want me to read them?
Do you mind? You can read off any that you want me to respond to.
Sure. So you got a question from Kumba, which says, Danielle, can you please share a specific time when you dared in this journey and received an unexpected result?
This happened. Hey, Dr. Kumba. So I would say one of the things that was really challenging and that surprised me was hosting a conference for 200 social entrepreneurs in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago. And I wanted to be able to pull these stories off of like a page and bring the people together in conversation with each other, because that can be very powerful. And it was, I think what was most surprising to me was just the response, like the fact that folks that I invited, some of them flew all the way as far, from as far as Oakland, California, to be there for this event. And then also in the 2 years since, some of the folks that are included in this book, some of the speakers that were part of that curated event are now part of a very small group of, in this particular instance, women of color who have raised $1 million towards growing their ventures. And, I think about, some of these women, I think I mentioned Jasmine Kiana, a sustainable shoe company, a girl scientist turned fashion designer. Or I think about some of the folks that are, sort of leading companies that create health solutions, particularly for underrepresented communities. And they're part of like a very small group of folks, but I know that it was the community building and it was the sharing of their stories that let them connect, even at that event, with some of the folks who have become their investors. So to me, the surprise is like, I had a hunch that we needed a different kind of convening and that this event could be powerful, but I've been very pleasantly surprised by just how much reach 2 days together in DC has had. And I encourage all of you to think about, events even like this one, where you just are in the right space with folks and introducing yourself, and how much of like that small ripple, like the effect that it can have in the years to come.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, what do you think is the first step for a person who wants to become a social entrepreneur?
I think the first step, and I talk a bit about this in chapter 1, is clarity, be clear. I think that it is really, really important to understand who you are. What are your values? What are the things that drive you? What are you really, really good at? What is something that you wake up thinking about and you go to sleep thinking about, and it's a problem that just is kind of following you around and you have a hunch around how to fix it? Lean in there, and then define for yourself what success looks like, and not necessarily success in 10 years, but success even in the first year or 2 years. Your clarity, your ability to calibrate from here to there is going to be instrumental in your ability to succeed. It's like a GPS. GPS asks you for 2 pieces of information: where you are and where you're going, and then it gives you direction. And if you don't know where you're going or where you are, a GPS cannot help you. And your internal compass is kind of be like that GPS, but you do need to input some information for it to work. And so I would say that clarity step, maybe start with journaling, start with talking to the people in your network, ask really good questions, and that will help you, I think, to get started.
Great, thank you. We have a 2-part question from an educator, Maria Amado. As educators, in order to keep growing and becoming stronger, we need support from organizations, and there aren't many in Connecticut. Where should we go? There should be a place where we can help get our decisions defined and get help with our sort of workforce needs.
Mhm.
And then she adds on to that question and she says, how can we organize ourselves? I would love to hear from you about this.
Thank you so much, Maria, for your question. And I think this is something that even I hope folks in the chat will also offer. My invitation is for anyone on the webinar, if you know of additional organizations that you've come in contact with, put them in there so that we can sort of like, crowdsource the answer to this solution. But I would say COVID has taught us something, right, Maria? It's taught us that place is, it kind of transient. Like, I think there was a time where we only thought of our community as who we could see and touch and feel. But because of the fact that we're living through a world where we've had to accept a level of disconnection, we're finding new ways to rebuild those relationships and connections virtually. So I would say it is very helpful to look at states that are nearby, look at organizations that have a national reach, plug in even by just following on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, the types of organizations that are talking about and offering the supports that you're looking for, because there may be many ways in this more virtual world that you could get the information and support you need that's outside of just what's closest by.
Great, thank you. We have a question from somebody named Tracy. Her question is, our community is one of several approved to develop and test a childcare business incubator model. How do you think the concept of social entrepreneurship could enhance our ability to attract investment?
Tracy, I would say contextually, there may be some nuance that I don't have to be able to fully answer. But I would say it's about framing, right? So what the concept of social entrepreneurship can do, in the one hand, is put the work you're doing in a bigger context and help make the case for how you're contributing to the bigger societal level problems with a solution that's very personal and local, and that works because it's directly connected to community. I think it may not be that in every space, the social entrepreneurship framing is appropriate. There may be some partners that really the right framing is about early learning opportunities and education. For others, it could be about ensuring school readiness, right? Like, there's lots of ways to frame the work that we do for the audiences. But I do believe that this is one frame that we should all get really comfortable with, because particularly for a lot of corporations, there was a study done by a cultural intelligence organization out of New York City called Sparks and Honey. And they found that increasingly, even corporate givings, corporate social responsibility, it's leaning towards social impact and people and organizations that can define how business is a driver for social good. So when we are able to talk about our work in that way, it just opens up more potential partners that could invest in us and work with us and help accelerate us.
Great, thank you. We do have more questions in the Q&A, but we do have a participant who's raised their hand. So I'm going to see if I can get them to unmute and share their question or comment. Natalie. Are you able to unmute, Natalie, and share your question or comment? Okay, while we're waiting for Natalie, are you there? Okay, while we're waiting for Natalie, I'll share another question. This is from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, with the scare of COVID so prevalent now, What are childcare professionals doing to protect the future of care, and how best can this be supported? So this might be a question for Kumba, and maybe some other people can share in the chat as well.
Definitely.
Well, for me, being, a provider, repeat the question, please.
Sure. With the scare of COVID so prevalent now, what are childcare professionals doing to protect the future of care, and how best can this be supported?
For me, when I get a call, for example, from a parent who is interested, in childcare, and I just had one actually a couple of days ago. I communicated with this parent about, of course, COVID and the precautions that we need to take before we can bring even a parent, to come for a visit. I think that communicating with the parent or the parents that here are some requirements that I have, the first steps before I can even, bring a child, into the daycare. For example, asking them if they are vaccinated. I know that not everybody agrees with, getting vaccinated. I do. And as such, this is one of the requirements, that I have. So that's the first step. And then the next step is, depending on the age of the child or the children, mask wearing. Is this something that, they would allow for their child, to wear? So those are the two things that, are a requirement. And then you go through the interviewing process, having them come and looking at your space, and then, signing that contract if you think that they met the requirements that you have, for your daycare.
Thank you. Okay. We had another person who was asking about unmuting. So I'm going to see if she's able to unmute. Kamara.
Hello.
Hi. Can hear you.
Hi. I was asking how do I unmute because I wanted to say something. I came on 18 minutes late, but I did hear when Danielle said something about basically that gratitude portion. Yeah, that really struck a chord with me because when I got into early childhood, I was mentored by someone who was in the business for like 20 years. And it's really gratifying to know that she had brought me on, mentored me to the fullest capacity. I can honestly attribute all my success to her. And then in turn, what I do is I pass it on. So if I know people who are starting up, I offer my services and my expertise, if I may say so. And even people who are already in childcare, we do have questions, from time to time. And I always have room for those questions and concerns, and I do offer my help. So because I'm grateful for someone who brought me in and made me successful, I pass it along, and it has.
Dana, are we supposed to be listening to a question right now?
Yes. Can you hear Kamara?
I haven't personally heard the question. So if you could reframe it or rephrase it a little bit, that might help.
Sure. Go ahead, Kamara.
Oh, so I have to start all the way over?
No, I can rephrase what you were saying, but I didn't want to cut you off with what you were saying.
Oh yeah. So in ending, it is true that, with gratitude, you can enhance even yourself, because it does wonders knowing that you got that help and you're able to help someone be successful, especially as women. I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry that people were having trouble hearing Kamara, but I could luckily hear her. And she shared that when she got into the business, she wanted to just make a general comment about your comments about gratitude. And she shared that when she got into the business, she was mentored by somebody who had been a childcare provider for 20 years and very generously shared her knowledge and expertise with Kamara to help her get started. And so she tries to do the same thing. She tries to pay it forward by being a mentor and offering her own skills and expertise to people when she knows that they're just getting started. So she was underlining the importance of gratitude. And I'm sorry that you couldn't hear her.
It's perfect. No, I think that's the right type of affirmation, that it's in the paying it forward. I appreciate that comment.
Okay, so back to the Q&A. There's a question from my colleague Shannon. And the question says, can you speak to the mindset and the effort to create something that fills a gap, that solves a problem that is needed, but innovative and doesn't yet exist?
I think it's definitely the components that we've been talking about, the clarity, the creativity. I think it takes an incredible amount of, it's interesting, confidence to do this. And I intentionally distinguish between confidence and courage, because we can have one without the other. And particularly around confidence, I learned in the process of talking to folks and also reading literature on this, that some of us naturally are disposed toward being confident. And that for those of us who are not naturally disposed toward it, confidence is actually something you can fake till you make it, right? Like you can practice confidence by putting yourself in spaces that require it. You can grow the amount of confidence you have around doing whatever it is. And so I would focus there. And it was found that particularly for women and starting in girlhood, there are all of these things that sometimes socially condition us to be less confident, and being aware of that conditioning can actually help us to create very specific practices about how we engage in the world, so that we can ensure that we're not sort of selling ourselves short or sort of shying away from the tough, hard stuff that we've not yet seen. But the last thing I would say about this is where the building community part becomes so important, because the more you surround yourself with those that are daring to do things that are new and different and innovative, such as like being a part of this community that has been curated here through All Our Kin, the more you help with your own reconditioning to make yourself more confident, bolder, more willing to take on those challenges. So it was an interesting insight, but the solution is doing more of what we're doing right now, which is just surrounding yourself with people who are creative and who are mission driven.
Great, thank you. Another question from our friend Maria. She asks, what happens when your path to success has obstacles? What do you do?
Were you going to take this, Ms. Hines?
Well, I was just going to say that, when when you hit a roadblock, reaching out to maybe folks. For example, I mean, I can use, all I can. I have reached out, so many times when I have, hit a roadblock, and ask for help. And that help could be even somebody coming to your home. I mean, at your daycare, where you have your daycare, or just, walking you through, that roadblock, to help you, overcome the obstacle. I mean, that's something that I have done, in the past. Or talking with, other providers. They're full of knowledge, and they may have experienced, that roadblock. Ask them how they have overcome that, roadblock.
Yeah, I also want to mention that one of the themes that came up was just giving yourself like the self-forgiveness. So I dedicated an entire chapter to letting go of perfectionism, exploring where it comes from, exploring why we sometimes feel more disposed toward it, and then also giving some examples of women who did the thing, even when it wasn't perfect, and with the full knowledge that they would not be perfect, right? And so once you change that expectation for yourself, you can recover so much faster from things that feel like failures and setbacks. So I would offer, yes, your community are the folks that can help pick you back up and keep you moving. But sometimes it starts with the self-talk, how we talk to ourselves, how forgiving we are toward ourselves is what can set us up to recover faster.
Okay, and the last question that we have in the Q&A is from Gladys. And it says, if I'm understanding it correctly, and Gladys, please let me know if I'm not. How can I talk to a person who has a disability? She is great with children and studied at the university to be a pre-K teacher. So how can I talk to her so that she can become a successful provider?
Without knowing in what ways this particular friend of yours is experiencing challenges, I would definitely encourage her to think about what are the unique ways that her way of moving through the world prepares her to either empathize or solve problems. One of the women in the book that I spoke to, her name is Erin Perkins. She's a great friend. She's deaf. And as we were engaging in a coaching community, she completely changed her business because whereas she had previously done brand and graphic design work and would sometimes feel like, yes, this was great work, but it wasn't necessarily her heart work. She started to discover that helping businesses build more accessible online presence and create more accessible events, all of the experiences that she had going to events or engaging with websites or engaging with content that either was not captioned or that was not designed for people who had disabilities, she could use those experiences to help other people reach a much broader set of people because they were often having blind spots around those with different abilities. So I would say this might be true of your friend, where maybe she's seeing her disability as a disadvantage, and maybe talking with her to encourage her to think about what are the things you know and that you've experienced because of how you move through the world that no one else would know unless they had that same shared experience. And how can that maybe be an advantage to you in serving a set of people that right now are being ignored or just underserved? I think that would be a great conversation to have that might help build her confidence and get her thinking about what she has to offer.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank our two guests and really all of you who are participating tonight for your thoughtful questions and comments. We know that this is an important moment for family childcare, and having conversations like the one we've had tonight can help us decide how we want to show up right now for our profession. So we're very excited to be able to raffle off 10 of Danielle's books, Dare to Think Purple, to tonight's participants. Since Danielle's book is only in English right now, although it is being translated, I don't know, Danielle, if you have an update about when the Spanish version comes out.
It's not expected until 2022.
Okay, well, be sure to let us know so that we can get some copies of the Spanish as well. But since it's only in English right now, we also have 4 copies of a book that's written in Spanish that has a similar message. And that book is called Ser Mujer Emprendedora y Madre en este Siglo, which would translate into English as something like how to be a female or a woman entrepreneur and a mother in this century. So we are not going to spend time doing the raffle tonight. We will randomly choose from tonight's participants for the raffle and mail books to them. And we'll announce their names in the follow-up email that we send. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of Danielle's book in the meantime, we're going to include her website and contact information in the chat. So I will do that right now. While I'm getting that ready, I'm going to invite my colleague Christy to join us to make an announcement. Christy.
Thanks, Dana. Can you hear me?
Christy, you should be able to unmute now.
Am I unmuted? I hope so. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Dana. Thank you, Kumba and Danielle. We started this discussion with Danielle's explanation of a social entrepreneur as, in its most simplest terms, as someone who is mission driven. And each of you are mission driven. You're driven to succeed in your businesses, to give children the very best care that you can, and also to support your field. I know that. It's because of you and many of your counterparts around the country that Congress, as we speak, Congress is debating whether to invest $450 billion into childcare for the next 7 years. And the bill is the best that I've ever seen on family childcare. It would,
Christy,
yeah,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
yeah.
I think people are having trouble hearing you. If you can't hear Christy, can you go to the interpretation button and unmute original audio? I think she's speaking on the original audio channel. If you unmute original audio, you should be able to hear her. Okay, go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so I don't know how much of that folks heard, but Congress is now debating whether to invest a lot of money over the next 7 years in childcare, including family childcare, in ways that would increase families' access to childcare and to pre-K, compensate providers very well for the work that you do, and make a wide range of professional development opportunities available to the early childhood workforce. That's happening because many of you dared to speak your truths to Congress. You've never stopped speaking your truths. And I would like to ask you to do this one more time by joining me in sending a message to Congress, encouraging them to fund this bill. if you use the link that I just put on the screen, it'll take you to a sample letter. It's very easy. The letter's in Spanish and English, and you can modify it or you can send it as is, and it will encourage members of Congress to vote for this important bill.
Great, thank you. Part of being a social entrepreneur is taking action. So I want to thank everyone again for being with us tonight. You can feel free to email us at network@allourkin.org. I'm putting that email address in the chat right now. If you have any additional thoughts or feedback about tonight's conversation, any additional questions that you thought of after thinking about what you've heard, we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you again for joining. Thank you so much to Danielle and Kumba for being our featured guests. I'm seeing some comments coming through on the chat. Thank you, thanks to you. I loved the information about growth. It's good that we are making progress and that nobody's getting their electricity shut off. There's a comment from Lottie. Thanks to everyone. This was great. She's thinking purple. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We'll leave the chat open for a couple of moments to collect some of your thoughts. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Danielle and Kumba, I don't know if you have any closing words you'd like to share with everyone.
Just good night and thanks so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you.